Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is Mari G, and this is part 3 on how to create this fur jacket. This jacket has inside pockets, outside pockets, lining, a zipper, and a hood. In this video, I will be showing you how I attach the lining to the hood and the zipper, creating the entire jacket. So if you'd like to see how I do that, continue watching. If you didn't watch part 1 and part 2, make sure you do that. The links are in the description box below. All right, so let's get right into it. Now that you have your jacket for your lining and your fur, it's time to make the hood pattern. Make sure that the length at the bottom of your hood matches up with the length of the neck hole on your fur jacket and for your lining. You will need a total of 2 pieces in your lining and 2 pieces in your fur. So to do that, just take your tape measure and make sure that it matches up with the length of the neck hole of the jacket. I'm using my pattern and marking the length. Mine was 13 inches. So I'm just gonna use my pattern to make sure that it matches up with those 2 point marks that I made. To make 2 pieces, make sure that your fabric is folded over when you cut out your pattern so that you will have 2 mirrored pieces. Once you have the 2 hood pieces in your lining, use that pattern to make the 2 pieces for your fur jacket. Be sure that they are also mirrored. So when you have your hood pieces, you're just going to pin them together, right sides together, and start sewing around the curve. When you are done sewing, this is how they should look. Open them up and take the seam of both hood pieces and put them together, right sides together, and pin around the entire hood piece, just like this. Pin it all the way around, all the way to the end, and once you are done pinning, you are just gonna sew where all of the pins are, following my finger. So this is how mine's turned out after sewing. I just flipped it outside. I turned it right side out and I pushed the lining inside of the fur, and then I just kind of finger pressed the seams. So this is how it looks. Very neat. You can top stitch the top, but you do not have to. I did not. After you have the hood put together, I recommend attaching the hood to the fur jacket before attaching the lining. You can do this all at the same time, but because the fur is so thick, I'm gonna do one by one. What I did was find the center back of the jacket by lining up the front edges and then marked it with the pin. And then I took the center back of the hood and lined that up with that pin and pinned it together, right sides together. After pinning the center back of the hood and the jacket together, I started to pin the entire hood around the neck hole of the fur jacket. I was making sure that I was pushing the fur towards the right side of the fabric so that when I sew, it's not sticking out. So basically just push it in towards the seams and flatten it out and pin it all the way around the neck hole. So I flipped it over so I can give you guys a better view of what I'm talking about. So starting from right here, it's still pinned together from the center back of the jacket and the hood. And I'm just going to flatten everything out again and pin it together around the neck hole of the jacket, making sure that I push the fur towards the outside of the jacket. And I match up the corner of the hood to that marking that I made on my zipper earlier in part 1. I made sure that I did that to both corners of the hood and pinned it to the marking on that zipper. So once everything was pinned together, this is how it's going to look. And then I just sewed around the entire neck hole, attaching the hood to the jacket. When I was done sewing, this is how it turned out. Now I pulled the sleeves inside the wrong way. I think that's how I would say it. But I did that to the lining and the fur jacket. I'm going to overlap the lining onto the fur jacket with right sides touching and matched up the center back with the center triangle piece right there of the hood, and I made sure that the that piece actually stuck out about a half an inch so that I would make sure that I caught every piece of it. I matched the center back, and then I matched up the side seams of the front part of the jacket, and I just pinned around the entire neck hole, attaching the lining to the fur jacket, matching up the edges and the corners. So I just pinned all the way around the neck hole and then sew all the way around. Once the lining is attached to the fur jacket by the neck hole, I laid it out flat onto my table, and I lined up the top shoulder seam of the lining to the top shoulder seam of the fur jacket, and I also matched up the armpit seam of the lining and the fur jacket, and I made sure that it was flat before I started messing with the sleeves and attaching it together. This way I didn't have any twist and my sleeve wouldn't be messed up. So once that is taken care of, I took the seam of the bottom of the sleeve of the lining and I matched it up with the seam onto the fur jacket with right sides together. And then I just pinned around the entire sleeve. Make sure that you press in your fur so it's not sticking out as you sew. So I pinned it all the way around, right sides together, making sure that the fur was pressed inside. After I pinned it all the way around, I sewed it just like that. In the top left corner, you can see that you have to like flatten it out. Make sure that the edges are lined up and the fur is pressed inside. Also make sure that you are just sewing the two edges of the bottom of the sleeves and not the actual sleeve itself, like where you put your arm at. You're just going to sew where you are putting the wrist. So if you see here, I kind of like press it open and open it, and that's how you're going to have to do it under your machine. After I attached the sleeves, I attached the lining to the zipper, and I did this by pushing the zipper teeth in between the fur jacket and the lining right sides together. So the lining is going to be pinned to the opposite side of the zipper, just like this. I pinned it all the way down and then I sewn all the way down. After attaching the lining to the zipper, I pinned the bottom of the lining to the fur jacket, pressing it in and just pinned it on the bottom. You should leave about a 6-inch gap. Here I pinned it all the way down, but actually where my hands are right now, that's where I'm going to leave the gap. And then I'm going to start sewing at the other seam on the other side. In the left hand corner, you can see what I'm talking about. I have like a big gap right there. Make sure you leave a gap and you sew down, stop, and then sew again at the next pin. Once the bottom of the jacket was sewn together, I went inside of that gap and pulled the hood through that hole and basically pulled the entire jacket through that gap. Be sure to also push your zipper outwards because the ending of it might not be, so just push it out just like how I did in the video. Made sure that the zippers were pushed out and that the sleeves were correct and that there wasn't any twist before I closed off the bottom. So I pulled those out, and then after that I pulled in that sleeve that I left a gap, and I put my hand in there and I pulled in that bottom that wasn't sewn together, and I just straightened it out and pinned it together so I could sew it. Once it's all pinned, I just sewn it and pushed it back in through that sleeve hole. So the bottom is now closed. I just pushed it in back through the sleeve hole, flattened it all out, straightened everything all out, and then pretty much you're done. You just have to close off the hole in your sleeve. Make sure that everything is closed and correct and pushed out before closing this sleeve hole, because this is it. You cannot go back in there unless you want to take it apart, and ain't nobody got time for that. So yes, just flatten that out and sew it. Once I closed off the sleeve hole, the jacket is done, and this is how mine's turned out. Ta-da! Something that I would totally do different is to make the inside pockets above the chest instead of below the waist. But like I said in part 1, if you want to do that to your jacket, you would just change your front bodice pattern for your lining instead of doing it the same way of the fur and the lining. Another thing is I would try not to cover my zipper as much, but that's about it. I love my jacket. It fits perfectly and I will be rocking it. If you'd like to see more DIY and sewing tutorials, please subscribe to my channel. I will be posting videos weekly. You can also follow me on my other social media accounts. Okay guys, see you guys in the next video.